Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Harmony Pack session. And tonight I am very excited to have my dear friend Tamar Peters join us. Tamar, as most of you know, was the brilliant mind and heart behind My Avatar Adventures, which sponsored our trip to Kenya, and the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, and the Masai Mara, and Amboseli, and all those wonderful places that we visited, and we had so much fun together. And when Tamar and I met, we met online. Actually, a colleague of mine, another animal communicator who was not able to go on the trip, gave Tamar my name, and as soon as she emailed me, I sort of the very first time I saw kind of correspondence between her and Val, and I thought, oh, that sounds too good to be true. and then she actually wrote me and said, yes, Val Hart gave me your name, and this is what we're doing, and are you interested? And because it was the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, I burst into tears, and I, of course, emailed her right away, and then we Skyped, and it was like we'd known each other for years, and the rest is history. So so what I would like to do is have Tamar share about her business as a conscious lifestyle and coach and animal activist. And I love that she has these 7C principles of conscious living. I love that we can, and these are based on principles that play out in nature and through the animals and in their relationship with the environment. And so we share the same mission here of returning to those systems and patterns that work and support a vibrant natural world and environment. So with that, I turn it over to you, my dear, and welcome to our pack again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I feel very honored to be here. And evening, ladies. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Conscious living is kind of quite a broad term for what it is that we're going to speak about, but I think it's something that's definitely growing all over the world. There is a lot of conscious awakening that people are talking about. As individual human souls, we're waking up to a new way and a different way of being, and the old paradigm of the way we used to live pretty much is breaking down. And, you see that everywhere, especially at the moment in the U.S., where, the way that our lives used to be, the way that we used to think, the way that of the things that were important, all of that is changing. And with that change, comes challenges because basic core belief systems are being challenged, basic ideals, concepts that we've lived with for generations and generations are literally being challenged at the core of them. And I believe ultimately this is the awakening of this conscious age that we're moving into. And it will be a much better existence of living and being on this planet. However, I think, in order to get there, there is quite a lot more pain, probably, and challenges that we need to go through in order to do that. And I've certainly felt it in my own personal journey. Having worked in the events industry for the last 27 years, I have worked with a variety of different organizations. And in more recent years, I started working with personal development speakers, international speakers from all over the world, and starting to train in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, or hypnosis, and all these dynamic, really started off in the mind type of personal development strategies, because people were starting to question a lot in their lives and wanted more than what they were getting, because generally people weren't feeling fulfilled, not just in their personal lives, but of course in their careers, whether they were in a job or whether they were running a business. And so this is where my journey started. in my conscious awakening, where really the veil was removed from my eyes, and, I had to have a good look at my life and the way I was living it and what was happening. And part of that process was my body really faltered, because all the emotional stresses that I'd gone through, particularly in the last 5 years I was in the UK before I moved here to Spain 5 years ago, really caught up with me on a physical level. But it was literally the breakdown of everything I understood and knew to be true. It was being really challenged at the core of it. And so, I have actually walked this talk, and so I'm sharing with you from my own personal experience, but also the research and the many conversations that I've had over the years from people in business and people working in their jobs, mothers, community leaders, indigenous, tribal leaders, a broad spectrum of people, and the same principles keep coming up. And so that's what I'm going to share with you a little bit tonight is about what I call the 7 C principles of conscious living. And the living part is more our lifestyle and what we do from a work or business perspective. So it has to be the combination of the two, but it really starts with yourself, in order for things to really change. And one of the ways that for me became very profound as part of that journey was my need to be in nature more than I'd ever felt before. And then when I was in nature, how much more observant I had become, how much more connected I was starting to feel, how much more beauty I saw in everything around me, and how present I became in that experience. And, I will say this consistently, that nature has really helped to save my life on so many different levels. Certainly from an emotional point of view, feeling that reconnection to the land, the energy of the land, Mother Nature herself as an ecosystem, and also just a more collective positive energy from, my day-to-day environment. And so I found that I was spending a lot of time in nature because that's where I preferred to be, and that's where I felt better. And I started to notice that the way that I smelt things changed. My ability to smell heightened, my ability to hear heightened. My sensitivity to pick up energy heightened. And so all these wonderful stimulation that I got really started to change things of the things that I wanted to eat, the things I wanted to concentrate on, the things I wanted to find out more information about. And so it's been a very personal journey, as well as identifying with many other people that they were on a very similar path. And so I kind of worked it down into, these 7 C principles that I truly believe that we can live our lives by. And so I'm going to run through them with you just as a generic concept of principles. And, fundamentally what's really important is that each one of us defines them for ourselves. I can share what they mean for me, and that may be similar to a lot of other people. But it is your own personal experience that these principles will get really defined. And what I found is that I use them everywhere, all the time, in everything that I do. So it's not something that is outside of me. It is something that's become part of who I am. And it's not what I do, it's who I am. So I have embraced these in all areas of my life, some more than others, because some are more challenging than others. So let me share them just quickly with you, and if you need a pen and paper, then go grab that quickly. I'm not going to go into too much detail around the actual concepts, because I want to share that a little bit more in how it relates to nature and how we can see examples of these principles playing out in nature. And so it's a wonderful example of being able to see where it's really, really working and why these principles are so fundamental, because it's all happening in nature and therefore becomes really easy for us to embrace them into our own lives. So the first one is what I call consciousness. And that's, the generalized term of being more connected with ourselves, our emotions, our higher beings, what we really want, being very clear about what we don't want to, what we stand for, what are our own principles, what are our own belief systems, what are our own true values as individual sentient beings. Also just being much more conscious of our environment. In other words, our home life, our working life, what we spend our time actually doing. And then also around, our individual purpose. What is it that we are here to do as an individual, as part of the collective? And so very much about paying attention to your soul's purpose. And, it's interesting because I've heard a lot about this, and I see a lot about this out in the spiritual marketplace, is that you need to find your purpose. And I don't think that's necessary for everybody. I think, yes, if you're driven, then that happens. But I think your purpose is really, as any being, is really about love and happiness. That in itself is the greatest purpose on the planet. And it's one of the most challenging things for us human animals to actually achieve. Where you see consciousness in nature being much more profound and actually quite a lot easier. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So consciousness is the first one. The second one for me is compassion. It is something that I think as human beings we've really lost sight of. And compassion, is for me linked to empathy. When you put yourself in the experience of somebody else or something else, you get to see it from a different perspective. So it's really caring about all sentient beings, but in an equal capacity. And so, the best example of that, from a human point of view, is Mother Teresa. And even Nelson Mandela. He had great compassion for, the people that put him in prison and put him away for so long and mistreated him for so long. And yet he was able to come out and be really compassionate towards those same people. And so I think compassion, especially in, the turmoil of life at the moment, is a very important principle that each one of us really needs to spend a lot of time paying attention to and embracing and then practicing it in every aspect of our lives. And that primarily starts with having compassion for yourself more than anybody. So it's that self-awareness and that self-empathy and really truly understanding who you are. The next one is one that I love because it helps us to understand that we're not alone, and that is about co-creation. Allowing ideas, concepts, visions from those that we live with, those that we work with, that we have in our community, to design the kind of lifestyle and path that we want to live on a daily basis, and co-creating that with others that are in our environment. There's that very simple story about, the pebble in the pond, that when you drop a pebble, the ripple effects are so large. Science has worked out that literally each one of us has the capacity to influence at least 1,000 people within our immediate environment. And that is because we could influence just 2 people, and those 2 people influence 10 people each, or 5 people each, and then they influence, and so that ripple effect goes out further and further. But co-creation says it. It says co-creation. It doesn't just say creation. It means doing it with others and other people that you find that are like-minded. But it's coming up with those ideas and concepts that are shared but different. So each new idea and new mind and new person can put a different look onto something that maybe you haven't considered. Because, of course, you're coming from your own experience, belief systems, and filters. The fourth one is about collaboration. And that is, looking at ways in which we build our own communities within ourselves. So it could be within the family. It could be with, kids, mums, dads, aunties, uncles. And when I say collaborations, it's always based on relationships. But these are profound relationships. So, even in the family, if you have family members that you don't get on with, I've learned and come to the stage where I go, okay, well, just because they're blood doesn't mean to say I have to get on with them. So even in my personal life, I choose those I like to collaborate with. And that is collaboration of my time in any way, shape, or form. So it's people I want to spend time with, whether they're family members, friends, or anybody else. And why I want to spend time with them. Because we're aligned, we have similar values, we're like-minded, and our hearts are and our minds are kind of in the same flow of each other. And we respect each other, we allow each other to be individuals, to have our points of view. And that sense of collaboration really plays out very well once you're very clear about who you are. And then, what are the people you want to be spending time with. This plays out very much in business, for sure, about, what are the kind of clients you want to be working with, because you're going to be spending a lot of time and effort on that. And, the service providers that may be involved in a business or that are involved in a job that you're doing. And having the right collaboration really makes a big difference. And I certainly learned that with the adventures that I was doing. My first attempt at them wasn't such a good collaboration, and that was because I didn't pay enough attention to the values being aligned. But my collaboration with Kate was absolutely perfect because we're like-minded and have very similar values. And that makes the experience so much better. So collaboration is a very, very big attribute and principle in conscious living. The next one is contribution. And this is really about, giving back to our communities, to causes, or to anything that we are truly passionate about. And giving without expecting anything back for it, but also being able to receive in gratitude. Because I find that a lot of people are very good at giving of your time, giving of your money, giving of your expertise, giving of your experiences, your knowledge, your emotional state, your energy to other people. But we tend not always to be very good at receiving. And so contribution is a two-way principle. It's about giving and receiving. And you have to be as good as contributing as you are to receiving. Because otherwise, we find this quite often, is the contribution is actually, the intention behind it may not be as pure as it sounds. In other words, it makes you feel good, that's why you do it, rather than it's not about making you feel good, it's just about giving back. Because you want to be part of a community or an aspect of something that really means something for you. So contribution, which I think a lot of people do, and sometimes overdo it, and other times underdo it, or do it in a way that is about the ego rather than actually about making a difference to other people, and that's really what the focus is about. Number 6 is culture. to encourage a culture of inclusion and participation. And that's a culture in your family, that's a culture in your community, your direct community, in your country. It's a culture in your workspace, whether you're in a job or running a business, that you have the opportunity to have a great influence on the culture of the way in which you would like to work or live. And, this comes into, brings in a lot of, what people have been doing for many years that they don't necessarily want to change, our history in our families and the way that things have always been done, the expectations, what's expected of us in the world or in the marketplace, in our jobs or our businesses, and all of that kind of conceptual idea when it comes to the culture of the way we behave and who we surround ourselves with. So a really important factor in conscious living is truly understanding that culture and surrounding yourself with the right kind of people that are aligned with you in that. And then, of course, the inclusion and participation is very much about, even if you do know more than your colleagues or your friends do or your family members do, that doesn't mean to say you shouldn't include their concepts or ideas or their participation as part of the process. And then the last one is about community. So building a community of prosperity engagement of all the people that are involved. So it's pretty much doing what's best for everybody as well as yourself. Because I've seen this a lot, especially when people contribute a lot of their time and effort to community projects, and yet end up crashing and suffering themselves because the first person they forgot, to give the time and being open to receiving is themselves. And so, community becomes a very powerful concept. It's something that particularly the indigenous people are very good at. I think in the Western world we're becoming a lot more separated than we need to be. We're certainly, seeing the divides very clearly that are happening all around the world, particularly from a political point of view. And, our sense of community is starting to break down. And that is very scary. Because it is, the way in which, and particularly women are very good at this, it's the way in which we can come together and make serious change for the betterment of all people. So those are the 7 principles that I talk about as part of conscious living, and they can be applied to the way that you live your life, and the way that you work in your job or in the business that you run. Now, I relate these quite broadly into nature, and there are very specific examples of them within nature, and I can't go into all of that detail on the call. And it is something that I'm planning to do a lot more work on and deliver in a more visual way. So hopefully through video. But I just wanted to share this with you all and get your feedback and let me know how you feel about it, and if there have been examples or experiences that you've had where you can share those with us as examples of these. So start with number 1, consciousness. All animals and plants and the earth is linked directly to source, or God, or higher being, or whatever you want to refer it to. Something that's greater than ourselves. And you'll find that animals don't have this interrupted link that we as human beings have, because we have free will, we have our brains with a certain level of intelligence, and that actually can work very much against us. Whereas in nature, everything has a direct link to its environment, the other species around, and it includes plants, as well as to source. So you see this great consciousness that's very heightened in the animal and plant kingdom. The white spirit animals, which we will be doing quite a lot of research and hopefully organizing a fantastic adventure next year on visiting some of these white spirit animals, are what we call the sacred beings of each of those specific types of animals, because each of them not only have messages to bring to us, but their involvement on the planet and in the ecosystem and in the circle of life and nature is so profound. And they show up when humanity needs help. And this has been, recorded throughout history, right across the world with all indigenous tribes, is that they've all come to the same conclusion about these wonderful white spirit animals that exist in nature. And that includes, a lot of what we're only now starting to discover about, how conscious animals are, and actually they're more conscious than we are, and plants too. And so, science is kind of trying to catch up with all of this at the moment. But you see it around all the time. With the animal kingdom, there are thousands of examples on a daily basis where, consciousness and the pureness of their consciousness is so apparent. Whereas humans, we have to take our knowledge, we have to take our understanding and actually put it into practice. When it comes to being more conscious, it's something that, we become on an every moment of the day. It's not something we do. And we are right now, I think, as a species, trying to elevate the level of consciousness in the human animals. And we take a lot of lessons from the wild because it works in harmony and it works all together. And I'll come on to that a little bit later. Compassion. It's incredible, actually, how much compassion animals feel, and particularly for human beings. It's quite interesting, especially when you talk to the wild animals, because they're not humanized like our pets are. They tend to share with us much more about how basically sorry they feel for us as souls who chose to come down as human beings on the planet. They, I had a conversation with a beautiful lioness who said, I have so much compassion for you. I know how difficult it is being a human on this planet. And I was like, wow, I'd never thought about that. I was being more compassionate towards the lions because of the way they've been treated. And there was this beautiful lion saying, no, you're the ones who are in trouble. You're the ones we feel really sorry for because we know how difficult your journey is as a human being. So your soul chose to come down as a human being rather than an animal, and that's a hard choice for you. And, we have a lot of compassion for what you're going through. And so that really opened my eyes and made me see things from a very different perspective. The giving of their bodies, the animals in the predator-prey situation, which Kate shares so beautifully with regards to, what happens in nature. The animals giving up of their physical bodies for the benefit of the carnivores because they understand that is the necessary balance that happens in nature. And they do it with grace and with honor, and that they want to do it. Of course, their survival instinct kicks into their physical body, and they try to run away because it's fight or fright. They have those instincts in them, but their level of compassion is just so tremendous, and we still don't understand that fully yet. And I think as we grow in our own consciousness, so we will understand a lot more about the compassion of animals. From a human perspective, we are all connected. I think we're starting to get much more awareness around being compassionate and helping each other out. understanding to live in somebody else's shoes and see it from a different perspective. It's one of the things that I have learned, that anybody that's put into a specific level of a situation or pressure or stress that you would never think could behave in a certain way ends up behaving that way. And it's the same in nature. Lions are not dangerous. Elephants are not dangerous. Hippos are not dangerous unless you put them into a situation where they are feeling threatened or frightened. And it's exactly the same as what we would do as human beings. And yet we're so scared of them because we're like, oh, no, that they attack people. Well, no, they don't just generally attack people. They only attack people if they're feeling threatened. And, of course, for them, in nature, it is about survival for them. We're disconnected from that level of necessity in our lives. We don't live from a place of survival. Animals live from a place of survival. And so, they have to be much more connected and compassionate and sensitized to it than we are. From a human point of view, it's not about judging the world whether it's right or wrong, but more about looking at those solutions. And those are the lessons that we can see playing out in nature. Is that that there's no judgment of animals. There's no you're wrong and I'm right, and that's the way it is. It's more of a okay, well that's okay, and let's carry on. Let's look for solutions rather than identifying potentially what separates us, because there's much more that binds us together. Looking at co-creation. Of course, all living beings are one. We're a collective. I think one of the best examples of co-creation has to be Yellowstone Park and what happened with the wolves. When the wolves were killed because of, finally killed out into complete extinction in the park, the natural circle of life really suffered because the balance was out. And understanding that, the wolves needed to come back in order to balance not just what was going on with the animals, but also what was happening, with the plants and nature, and the story about the rivers had actually moved because of this knock-on effect that had happened because the wolves had gone extinct in the park. And so that's a pure example of co-creating a perfect, harmonious environment as a collective species. And that's not something that we do very effectively as humans. And the reason we don't do that is because we tend to stand alone. We're separated. We tend not to look at how can we do this together, how can we do this for the betterment of all of us. So, things that we need to look at on a daily basis, and things that we can change on a day-to-day basis in doing that is like we have a problem with plastic. We have a problem with toxins. We have a problem with basic impact of the human footprint in the world. So how can you on a day-to-day basis change that? Recycling is one thing. Not buying plastic bags is another. Trying to buy as little plastic as possible. Not using things in your house that are chemicals, but things that are more natural. Not killing every living bug in your house. Trying to remove them from your house and put them back in the garden where they really belong. So, little things where we can significantly co-create with our environment rather than fight against it, which I think is a better way of doing it. And again, lots and lots of examples of those in nature. Collaboration. And one of the things that we saw quite a lot of on our trip was this great collaboration between the birds and the smaller animals when predators were around. So you would have the birds that would give a certain kind of call, which was an alarm call to say there are predators around, or the smaller animals doing exactly the same thing. So the larger antelope letting the gazelles know, that there were predators around. So it was this kind of collaborative way of keeping each other safe. We saw herds of zebra, wildebeest, and lots of gazelles. And that the reason that they stick together is so that they can work together and not be singled out, so they can, stand together with each other, but then they can also alert each other, and there are lots more eyes then looking for predators and, sounding the alarm as and when they needed to. So again, a lot of examples of ways that all kinds of animals work together collaboratively in order to, gain what they need to in keeping their lives at a certain balance. Humans are the same. We could be doing the same thing. You're working together with nature and learning from nature for the answers that we're looking for, rather than being detached from it and trying to look at getting humans to solve human problem. It's kind of funny. I always have to laugh at this. So you're going to use humans who only think the way humans do, who created the problems in the first place, to try and solve them. And I go, well, why don't you look at the most obvious place where everything works when humans don't interfere, and that is nature. That is, how the animals and nature work together in harmony and symbiosis. And if only we would turn our eyes more towards nature and look at those examples, I know that we would find better solutions than any humans could possibly come up with. And we don't know enough yet, but we know a lot more than we. Respect ourselves as equals. It would be a better opportunity for us to do that.
We lost you there for just a minute. You said, just go back and repeat that last sentence again.
Okay, so humans about working together with nature and learning from nature itself has much more of the answers that we're looking for than trying to look towards the humans that created the problem in the first place. And it's because nature has its own natural way of taking care of crises within nature in order to balance it. Now, it doesn't work all the time. Sometimes it becomes destructive and it can't recover from it. The natural fires that happen. So we're not talking about human fires. We're talking about natural fires that happen because of, the lightning. Those kind of things have to happen in order for the new growth to happen. And for the land to replenish itself. And we go, oh, but that's terrible. But it isn't. It's Mother Nature understanding what she needs to do in order to look at the bigger picture within that area. And so, if we studied much more of this, we would understand it much better, and we would be able to use those principles ourselves within doing it with humanity. And then contribution. Predators supply. I always look at this. So, you have the lions that do the kill, and then you have the hyenas that try to steal it. If they don't get it, they then get to the bones and they crunch all the bones. Then you have the vultures that come and do the last bits of picking and stuff. And then you get all the insects that come and then finally finish off everything that remains. And so this whole ecosystem lives off what the predator has done. So they have contributed to the welfare of a variety of animal species for survival. It's the same with herbivores. When herbivores like elephants or giraffe are eating lots of leaves and berries and seeds and so on, it goes through their system and comes out, and their feces are then into the ground. The seeds are released. The nutrients goes back into the ground, and the cycle starts again. For instance, the dung beetle, which I think is the most amazing beetle on the planet, picks up the rolls, goes into the middle of a what do you call them? No, polite word, but the poo of an elephant, the patty of an elephant, yes, and literally rolls up a ball twice its size of dung, and it rolls it into its little hole in the ground, and it lives off that. And it's a very important part of helping to redistribute the nutrients that come out of an elephant. So, a very, very, very simple thing that has a profound effect in nature. And it's all about each individual species having its contribution to the success of the environment. And it's so fantastic to watch because it's, each one has their own important responsibility. And they all play a part. And that's the contribution that they give to each other to help each other to survive in that environment. So, from a human perspective, it's making a difference on a daily basis by doing something that will help your environment, that will help animals, others that are less fortunate. And it's not just about money. It could be about time. It could be about experience. It could be, advice. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be about money, but something that, helps somebody else or something else within your environment so that it makes your environment better. And, if everybody just looked at that from a contribution point of view, there would be a lot happier and a lot less challenging and struggles in the world. We're so unbalanced with regards to that because, and this comes really into the next point, which is culture, which is, as a species, we have a culture as an animal species, and that's something I want everybody just to spend 2 seconds thinking about. We are animals, and we have forgotten that we're animals. We have disconnected ourselves from animals and nature and kind of put ourselves and separated ourselves and put ourselves above it, above nature. And it's that separation that's destroying us as a species. And, our culture is to dominate, to own, to lead. It's a much more aggressive way of behaving. And so we've ended up with a world where, you have people starving to death. You have people who have no shelter, people with no water. What I call the basic human right of being a human is to, have food, have water, and have shelter. And we live in a time where, intelligence-wise, we have no excuse not to have every single person on the planet be able to do that, every single human on the planet to be able to do that. If we bring the money aspect into it, because, of course, that's how, and you realize that we are the only species on the planet that pays to live here. And yet we're the ones that are telling ourselves that we're the most intelligent. And yet we're the only species that have found a way to monetize our existence, which, just doesn't, it's not right as a culture, and it's why we're in dire straits as a species. Whereas when you see the honor and respect in nature, and even with the lions who may own their territory for a period of time, they don't own it permanently. They have it for a period of time, and then they have to move on, or somebody takes it over from them, because that's the nature of how the balance works. There's honor, and there's respect, and there's a way of things that happen. And that's how the animal and the plant life live in this beautiful culture of balance, honor, and respect. And it is the perfect circle of life that exists in the world. We humans, we need to decide, what is it that we want to, what environment do we want to live in? What feeds our soul? what is the kind of culture that we want to be able to contribute towards and work together with, and other people on the planet. And so, for instance, I don't, quite a few of my friends may not be aligned with me in a lot of my way of thinking. And so my friends have changed because of that. One of the reasons I want to move from Spain to Kenya is because this environment doesn't feed my soul. They struggle with understanding human rights here. Not human rights, animal rights, and human rights. And it's usually when they struggle with human rights, they struggle even more with animal rights. And that does not feed my soul. So the culture here doesn't work for me. And therefore, I have to remove myself from it to a culture that does work better for me. And so, this is kind of part of that aspect of how we can make those changes in our lives to ensure that the culture that we live in, the culture that we embrace, and the culture that we contribute to, and that we collaborate and we co-create with other people, is one that feeds our soul. And if it isn't, you need to change it. It really is just that simple. And the last one is community. It's incredible. The herds all work together. The prides have a hierarchical way of working together as their community. The elephants have their specific way that their family exists and works for the betterment of that particular species. So every community has their own particular way, and then they have a collective way of working together. So one thing you'll never see in nature is waste. There's no waste. A lion doesn't go out and kill 10 gazelles because he kind of felt hungry. Actually, it's not him, it's the herds, because it's usually the females that hunt. But they don't go and try to kill a lot at one time. They only take what they need. And they leave nothing behind because, of course, all the other animals get involved to collectively take what they need. And so there's no waste. There's also no greed, not taking more than what they need. And, of course, there's no payment for it, other than potentially for the predators, taking on aggressive animals such as a buffalo. They may come off second best trying to do that. And so, yes, there may be a bit of pain as payment in order to do that. But they're very good at adapting and working together. It's incredible if you go into the history of how animals have adapted to their different environments, global warming and environmental changes, until they can't adapt anymore. But they are very good at adapting. It's been said now that elephants are not being born with tusks. And one of the reasons they believe now, the scientists, is because of the potential extinction of their species. And they're very aware of it. And so if they're not born with any tusks, then they don't have the problem of being hunted, which is kind of incredibly fantastical and sad, because it's sad that they have to do that. And that's, of course, where we come in, about what we're doing to them. But there is adaptation because they want the survival of their species. So, yeah, all your herd animals, your lions, your lions, the elephants, any of the herd-type species that working together as a community. One of the things that we saw, which is quite new and never really happened to the extent it has, are these 5 cheetahs that we saw, 5 male cheetahs. Now, sometimes they'll get together and hang out with each other, but they don't normally stay together or hunt together because they're normally solitary animals. But they've adapted to that specific environment that they've all found themselves in, and now these they call them the 5 Musketeers, are National Geographic are doing a whole program on them because they're quite unique. They've adapted to what was going on in the environment. So, from a human's point of view, we really have to come together as communities, come together as families, come together and work together because we're not alone. We all are connected, and everything that every one of us does has an impact energetically on the planet, and that affects everybody on the planet. And so, if we can be more aligned with how nature manages environmental changes, especially with climate change and the planet going through the changes that she is going through anyway. Yes, we are contributing to it and making it happen quicker, but she is going through her own evolution too. We can make that much easier for all of us if we see and learn those lessons from nature. That's it. That's my 2 cents worth.
That was more than 2 cents, but it was so wonderful.
Yes.
It was, but I mean, I love there is a concise thing about it, and that it's very clear. I love how you've thought it through, and with all the 7 C's, there's also a circle because they all circle back together, and I just love that because it is about a circle. It's not about anything linear because everything in nature works in circles and spirals and cycles, and so it's so important for us to, I think, embrace these principles in every way we can. If we're not, like Kim is in business for herself. She has her veterinary practice. He works within a veterinary practice that's just been bought out by a big corporation. So how do you take some of these principles and use them, whether you're an employer or an employee, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're a community organizer, or you're a work-at-home mom, whatever you are, these principles can be utilized and thought about because they're all based on becoming conscious and present, right?
Correct. And one of the reasons why our collaboration works together is because it's based on that principle that I needed to pay more attention to, that I didn't the first time around. Another example of that is, the adventures that we go on, the tour operators that we use. I could have used one from the States or one, locally here in Europe, but it made more sense when it was pointed out to me by you to use one in Kenya, because that would benefit the Kenyan people, the local people of the place we wanted to visit, which again fulfills one, that a number of the principles that we've spoken about. And so, there's so many ways in which we can do that. And, even though I'm working through all of those and getting most of them into most areas of my life, there's always room for us to improve. And it is just a better way of doing things. You feel better about it. And the results are better. I mean, that company that I've used there was amazing. More amazing than, and I've used a lot of tour organizers or, land organizers in different countries all over the world. And they were superb. And they're called Amazing Memory Safaris, which just makes me laugh because that's exactly what they did for us.
They did, and they were so responsive and so caring.
Yeah.
I mean, the other, when you're looking about culture and contribution and collaboration, you have the caring principle in there, which is so very important, and they were, and they took responsibility. If they forgot to tell us about something, they took responsibility for it. It was a lovely collaboration. And so those are the kinds of things we want to repeat and encourage and and continue with. I wanted we've just got a few minutes left, but I wanted to see if anybody on the call had any questions or comments for you, Tamar. So I don't know if we muted, but if you did mute yourself, hit *6 and just come back on and just, please jump in.
I think
anybody
a lot to digest
else?
there, but
Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, a lot to digest, and I think if you are conscious in this way, it does become a part. How do I want to say? I think all makes sense that you want to collaborate, of course, with people of like minds. But when there's the opportunity, like I'm thinking in my practice situation, sometimes. Not sometimes, all the time, clients get some sort of environmental speech as far as, not using pesticides and such. But what I'm saying is I think it's important, yes, to definitely collaborate with like-minded and community, et cetera, but to every day and every interaction where there's an opportunity to have a kind and gentle inroad to talking to people who may not be thinking in that regard because of having that pebble effect, and
yes.
even if you think they think in the other way, because maybe you do change that thinking of just that, that one person, and then of course the ripple effect from that. But it's hard. It's really, really hard. But I think that's the biggest thing, is trying to tell people, speak up and stand up and come back to a group like this group for moral support, because it's really hard doing that every day. But then you know that your group is behind you. But to say it even when you think it may or may not be accepted.
Correct. And it's one of those things that is challenging. There are times, and I kind of enjoy it sometimes, where I really shock people with some of the things that I say, especially when it comes to animal communication. And I'm really happy to say, we communicate with the animals, and you get these really strange looks, and I go, that's okay. If you look it up on Google, you'll find out quite a lot about it, because it is true. And just because they don't know about it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's just seeding the idea, but also living the principles. One of the things I think that really changed for me wasn't just so much talking about it, but that people actually saw me every day living those principles. And they kind of went, oh, that's different. Also, what I started to find is that I started to attract the same type of people, which was then really lovely from a business perspective, because it meant that I was now working with people that I actually really liked, and I didn't even have to go find them. They tend to kind of get magnetized in that regard. And I think it's just, opening our existence and our spiritualness in it that allows people to kind of go, oh, that's interesting. They may not completely agree, but they go, well, that's interesting. I want to find out more about that. Or I like the way that person's doing that. I'm not quite sure what it is they're doing, but I like that. That feels right for me. So
that's true. I think Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think also, too, kind of the flip side of that, even though you I guess that's kind of an offshoot of that, of even though you think you may not want to dare to go there because you don't think these people think the same way.
Yeah.
Actually, you're giving them permission, because in so many times when you do talk about animal communication or whatever, they were reluctant to bring it up. But when you bring it up, they go, oh, yes. and then they're happy and they're relieved because they didn't have anybody they think they could talk to about that, or, or whatever it is, or environmental aspects. So you're right. You collect more and more people, but I guess what I'm saying is broaching when you think it's a difficult thing, or it may not be accepted, that go ahead and go there.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be careful, and particularly, when pets are in harm, or, they're passing away, you've got to be very sensitive. That sensory acuity to somebody else's state and belief systems is really important in those crucial times. And be reassuring in that regard, in a more conscious way, and so that plays into it. And I pick up sometimes it's not appropriate to have to go too far into a conversation unless somebody says okay. But what I found is no matter where they're from, the minute you start talking about things, they start to share. And it may not be exactly the same thing. They may not quite have figured it out or put their finger on it. But they go, oh, I know what you're talking about. It sounds familiar, even though they haven't formulated it for themselves. Or they may not have looked at it in that way. So, for instance, one of the guys on the beach in Mombasa in Kenya has this little hut where he's selling all of his little art stuff. And, I was having a conversation with him, and I said, we pay a lot of money to come and have a holiday for 5 days here to have your lifestyle you live every day. And he said, no, but I'm poor. I said, no, you're not. I said, look at your office. It's on a beautiful white beach with beautiful blue sea and sunshine and palm trees. I said, do you have enough food? And he said, yes. I said, do you have a good family? He said, yes. I said, do you feel good in your community? He said, absolutely. And then he said, you're right. Money can't buy you love or happiness.
Right.
And I said, exactly the point. And I said, look, we're in the Western world, we're poisoning ourselves, we get very sick. I said, have you been sick at all in your life, or any of your family? He said, no. And I said to him, it's all about perspective, and there are more measures to happiness and success that are not money.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with money. But I'm just saying that is not the only way to measure success, harmony, love, happiness. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, wow, And then he said, you know what, I'm really grateful for my life. And I went, there you go.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's just seeing it from a different perspective. And he'd never thought about it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I said to him, you can take my life. You can go back to Spain, no problem. I'll hang out here. And he went, no. He said, no. I said, you can have my money. And he goes, no, I think I'll stay here. I said, exactly.
That's wonderful. That's great.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Well, thank you, Kim. That was really helpful. And I think, so much of what we do is seed planting, right? And we test the waters. We put that, we see if we feel. I mean, that's the other thing about empathy, which is part of compassion, is feeling where somebody is. And testing, as you said, test the waters a little bit to find out what they're open to, and saying it to them in a way that's received. And this is one of the things when I teach animal communication. I was just talking to my apprentice yesterday, and we were talking about delivery, and I said the most important thing is to say something the human that they can receive. If you tell them something and it's too painful or it's too confronting or it's too this or that, you lose them, and then that doesn't benefit the animal. That doesn't benefit the person, and so in everything that we do, Kim and Tamar and I and Penny, our whole way of operating is how do we make this? How can we help the human receive this new information, whether it's holistic or whether it's of a spiritual nature? Penny is really good at feeling people out and saying, if their animal's getting ready to pass, have you thought about having a conversation before they pass? And then she tells them about me and her experience working with me. And but she doesn't do that with just everybody, right? So that's the same.
Yeah.
Kim has this wonderful holistic clinic. So the good news is most of the people that walk in her door are interested in holistic, or at least interested in learning, or at least putting their toe in the water. They did come there for a reason, even if they don't know what the reason is. And I love that Kim gets that and works with that, because that is going to spread. And that's exactly what we're all about. And I think that, as you say, Kim, that's so much of the Harmony Pack, is we are all pack members who feel that way, who want to be part of these 7 C's. Oh, that's kind of funny. We want that in our lives. We want to be sharing, those concepts in our lives. So thank you, Tamar.
Yeah.
I know we could talk for a long time more, but I love this, and I hope that those of you who are on the call will re-listen, because again, there's so much good information here. I took notes, and I think it's just really valuable for all of our Harmony Pack to hear and look at how many ways they are doing this in their lives, in their work, in their families, in their in how they walk in the world and what they contribute to, like you say, with time or money or what have you.
Absolutely. And whenever we want to re-energize or go on holiday, we always choose nature to do it in, and that says everything. Yeah,
it does.
Right.
It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's. And certainly our pack.
There is an instinct. It's an instinctive thing in us. It's in our instinct is to go and reconnect because we need it, and so it's there. It's just a matter of bringing that to the fore again. It's the same with animal communication, bringing that to the fore again, because everybody can do it. We just need to exercise those muscles. Yeah.
Yep, and reminding everyone of the connection, which
Agreed.
is so healing. So thank you so much. And thanks everybody who
pleasure.
participated tonight. And Tamar, I think it's time to go to bed.
Yes, 3:15 in the morning. But the problem is I always get so hyped up after these that I'm like awake. And I'm like, now I'm stimulated.
I understand. It's been lovely. Thank you everyone.
So much.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much, Kate.
You bet. Good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.